those of you joining us, thank you for being here during this presentation. If you have any questions come up, you are muted. So you can type those into the bottom where it says Q&A or chat. Either one of those will work. I would like to introduce you to our presenter. Tom Carson is editor of the Masonic Token Listings on Token Catalog, along with Dennis, and help me out, Tom, last name? There we go. He co-wrote the NLG award-winning Tennessee obsolete paper Money. And Tom is going to be giving us information today about the Royal Arch Masonic penny errors. So Tom, I'm going to pass it off to you.
Okay, welcome. Today we're going to have a very different type of presentation. I'm going to do it from Token Catalog. And Token Catalog, I'm the Masonic editor for Token Catalog. I started on it about 8 years ago, 1,400 listings, and we're almost ready to go over 19,000. But hopefully you'll learn some neat things on Masonic errors and how to use Token Catalog to find them. So I've got Token Catalog up and I'm going to log in. I advise everybody to register and set up a login. You can go in without logging in, but there's a few more features that you can do. But I'll log in. So I'm screen sharing good. Now, the main page of Token Catalog lists all the states, but it also has show other countries, and it has probably every country in the world, and a lot of them that aren't with us anymore. So I need to go back to the United States. Now, let me go back to it the other way and go home. The Masonic pennies were made for about have been made for about 130 years. And if you do anything for 130 years for a whole country, probably as many as 100 different companies making the pennies over 130 years, you're going to have some errors. So we're going to look at the errors, and I'm going to show you tricks on how to use Token Catalog better. I'm going ahead and click on Alabama. And up here on all listings, when you get into it, you can come down and choose Masonic tokens. And from now on, all we're going to deal with is Masonic tokens. But it's got broken into, you can find carnival and circus tokens or parking tokens. But I'm going to the Masonic. And by the way, there's right now 18,900 US Masonic listings. And we're adding maybe 100 a week. Now, you've got tremendous search capability. You can type in an exact phrase, or you can do all these words. And the way I've got the errors set up, it's more for all these words. So I'm going to type in error and state. And instead of Alabama, I'm going to search all the states. And here's the examples of errors that deal with the state. First one, Graham, Georgia. Well, this penny wasn't from Graham, Georgia. It was from Graham, Alabama. Graham, Alabama was right on the border between Alabama and Georgia. Probably went through a Georgia post office, and somehow the token manufacturer got mixed up. we have documentation from the grand bodies of the York Rite of state of Alabama saying, yeah, this is Graham, Alabama, not Graham, Georgia. But there are bunches of these, and we're finding more all the time. Also, there were some issues with spelling. This is Phoenix, Arizona. In the state name, they flipped the 0 and the I. Instead of Arizona, it's Arizona. A nice, interesting mistake. This is a good old 2-error penny. The chapter, it says Washington, D.C. Well, this was Washington, North Carolina. So they went back in and repunched it. And I haven't listed the repunch yet, but the chapter was Moy instead of May. So this one's a double error. George Hampton Lovett was one of the most famous Masonic, most famous Civil War die, his family sinkers. And he got into the Masonic pennies very early. The first Masonic pennies from dies were made around 1890. George Lovett died in 1894. And he did about a dozen different pennies. This particular one, he had a slight problem with. He's got Akron, Indiana. Well, it was Akron, Ohio. According to King, they were sent back, and the family kept 2 of them, which are in the King collection or at the House of the Temple in DC. Well, this is the 3rd one. I did a seminar on Masonic pennies a couple years ago, and I made the statement that there were only 2 known, and one of the guys watching sent me the pictures of the 3rd one. I wanted to buy it, but he wasn't quite interested in selling it. But it was made in silver and copper. Bowling Green, Kentucky. Instead of KY, it's K period, Y period. Not a major, but it's still some of the errors they made over 130 years. New York, New York should be, it came out as Newark, New Jersey. Well, it should have been Newark, New York. And they went in after they did the NJ, restamped it, turned it into NY. And you can see part of the J under the Y where they restamped it. There were a lot. Enderlin, South Dakota, or Enderlin's in North Dakota. That's one of the more famous cross-state errors, and people can have it. I've found out in the last week that there's another one that I didn't know about. Boulder City, Nebraska. Should have been Boulder City, Nevada. But I haven't got a copy of it yet to add to token catalog. Well, those were the errors where they goofed up the states. Let's look at the errors where they goofed up the cities. So here under all words, I took out the error state and I'm going to put in city. Okay. This one, when they first made this one, they made it Sondra, Sondra, and you can see the D behind the O. So they went back and changed it to Sonora like it should be. You had Bradenton, Florida, they did two different ones as Bradentown, Florida, and it should be Bradenton, Florida, Manatee River chapter. Bowdoin, Georgia was spelled with an O, and this is both the chapter name and the city name are wrong because they spelled it with an E. Bowersville, Georgia, there never was a chapter in Bowersville. It was Livonia. And what happened, we think this first secretary for the chapter lived in Bowersville. And he had a Bowersville mailing address. So they made his pennies with Bowersville. All the others are with Livonia. Georgia had another one, Tennille. It should have been Tennille, Tennille. Chenoa chapter in Illinois, they goofed and put an E in it and made it Chenova. Chicago Long. Long had been annexed by Chicago in 1889, and this chapter wasn't started till 1993. The first pennies made were Chicago Long, Illinois, and it shouldn't have been that way. It should have been Chicago. And as far as I know, this is the only Chicago Long penny there is. Another example of annexation in Chicago is Ravenwood. And Ravenwood had already been annexed by Chicago. The World Columbian Exposition was coming there, so they formed the Columbia chapter in what used to be Ravenwood and put Ravenwood on it. The chapter didn't like that, and they had them remake it Chicago, and there's quite a few remainders existing for this chapter. One of the bigger goofs is up in Minnesota. There's a town called Crookston and there's a town called Brookston. Well, the company that made this made a whole lot of errors. And instead of Crookston, they came out with one with Brookston. And see more errors from them in a few minutes. Poplar is a tree, and Poplar Bluff, Missouri is named after the tree. Well, on their pennies, they became Popular Bluff, Missouri. McAllister, Oklahoma. This is another George Hampton Lovett. McAllister is spelled with an E, Macalester. And this one's Indian Territory. It's a really nice penny, extremely rare. Most of the Lovetts are rare because he died in 1894, and the first collectors of Masonic pennies weren't until right around 1900. And it was hard to find, and they didn't know about a lot of them. Muskogee, Oklahoma, it should be Muskogee instead of Muskogee. Okay, now let's go back up and let's skip over and do something funny, more fun before we get into this. I'm going into one of my favorite errors, and this error has cost me a little money. It's one of the most beautiful Masonic pennies. Going into San Francisco, the California chapter number 5. And it's gorgeous. This is the error on it, and it is the most common of all of them. On the back here where it says HTWSSTKS, it's going counterclockwise, and it should go clockwise. Hiram, Tyre, widow's son, sendeth to King Solomon. So they did it wrong. And they made a bunch of really beautiful bronze pennies. And you'll see these on eBay. I sold one this last week as nice as this for 15 bucks. But you'll see them, they ranged by it now for $35, $50. Somebody wanted $270 for it. Due to the error, they didn't use many of them. It's fairly common. But they made it in bronze, and a little bit rarer, they made it copper. And this copper one's extremely nice. It's double struck. It's one of the prettiest double struck coins I've ever seen. It's just got wonderful. The second strike was just off a tiny bit to make everything fully double struck. But again, here it's got the error going counterclockwise. Well, the chapter didn't like it, so they went back to the company. And the company went in, and this one you see is going the right direction. Well, let me pull up, bring one over. Now I can zoom in on this one really big. If you can look, you know, this was the S for Solomon, so they had to punch the T over it. You can see parts of the S there. W was punched over a K, and you can see part of the K there. You've got a part of the S where it's repunched here, and this one was repunched over a W, and it makes the K real funny. So they repunched it, and they made the chapter some more. Now this one is a good example. It's rarer than the error one. Well, by repunching it, they weakened it. And here's a repunched one in aluminum. And I'll pull this one over so I can zoom in on it real good. You'll notice it's starting to crack. It cracked here, it cracked around, and it went from one side of the die to the other. When they went in and softened it to repunched it, they hurt the strength of the die. It's also got another crack coming down this way. Okay, this one is not the final version of the crack. It finally went to the point where, and I'll pull this one up and bring it over. You know, we had the crack on the other one. It went down across and down this way, and then it went down this way, and here's the final crack. Okay, how do we know it's the final crack? Well, the dies exist for this penny, and here's the dies, and it shows the final crack. At this point, they had to quit using the reverse. Now, they made a few more from the obverse. We have it in I have it in brass, and I have it in aluminum. I don't know what other, I haven't found it in any of the other metals. But in 1929, Thomas Perry's sons, their big die had broken. They were having to use a stock die. They went broke. So their die broke and they were broke. Another company came in and made a new design when it's got larger 1 penny and it's got wider rims around it. We don't know who made the replacement penny. It wasn't Thomas Perry's sons, but that's a nice little story on an era that probably may have happened over 10 years. From the time they first made it, punched it wrong, till they repunched it, till they broke the dies. Okay. Let's go back in and look at errors on the chapter. So I'm going to go in all words and type in error chapter and tell it to search. And we had some interesting ones. A lot of them are over the number. This one shows chapter 70. Well, that chapter was actually 79. Probably couldn't read the handwriting. This one is a little further off. They have 89 for it, but it was actually 58. Ozark, Alabama. Arkansas, I'm sorry. That one's a little hard to see. It's got a 1 instead of a 7. It may have been a partially plugged die. This one's interesting. They can't spell chapter. You know, they chapters on almost every one. Well, this one's C-H-A-P-E-R. It's not a very common error. This one's a minor error. There's a double transfer on the I of Jacinto. Stockton, California, wrong chapter number. It should have been 28 and they got it as 23. Couldn't read the handwriting. Guilford, Connecticut. They goofed up on it, then they went in and over, it looked like the 5 was upside down, but they put a 44 over a 50. A 54. Okay. And there's more of those. You see how to do it now. Mount Vernon, Iowa was interesting. We found the die before we found the penny. And the die was ASHLER. This one was a Thomas Perry son die. And it should have been ASHLAR. By the way, there are 5,000 of the Masonic penny dies now and we're in the process of adding them to token catalog. Jackson, Kentucky, should be chapter 160, chapter 150, on and on. You can go back and look at them yourselves. This one's interesting. The Albany chapter, Capital City chapter, when it first came out, it was using capitals spelled with an A, and they had several issues that way. Then they switched over to an O, and so I don't know which one's the error. We know this is one of the later dates because it was an anniversary penny, but it's a right pretty penny. The back on them has a beautiful scene of a priest and some Indians and growing crops. And B.P. Wright was the first president of A&A, the 5th president, and he started collecting these. And he was really pushed everybody to start making real pretty ones. This one has chapter 137. It's an ugly one, but it's the only one known. It should be 317. Let's go to try something. Let's go to mules. In case you don't know what a mule is, mules used a lot in paper money. And a mule is where the back and front are mismatched. They shouldn't be there. Like you might have $100 front and a $10 back. Well, in these, we've got the obverse and reverse dies that shouldn't be there. Now, some of these are mistakes. Some of them may be samples, and some of them may have been made for collectors. I don't know. Here we've got the Grand Chapter of Minnesota and the General Grand Chapter Little Rock, Arkansas. This could have been for a meeting back in 1903, or it could be somebody just pulled 2 dies and did it. This is the Almond chapter out of Charles City, Iowa. And the back of it, it's got, I think this is the state capitol in Columbus, Ohio. Now, it's possible it could have been that they went to a meeting in Columbus. I don't know. But this die, by the way, is cracking real bad on the front. This die was fairly recent. Both of them were from 1970, and one of them's from Fonda, Iowa, and the other one's from Edleysburg, Pennsylvania. May have been an honest mistake, may have been a salesman sample, don't know. Here's the General Grand Chapter in Boston, Massachusetts, and this is like the one from Arkansas we saw a few minutes ago, but the back of it is got a Minnesota, the bread and butter state. Crazy mule. And this one, somebody must have been playing with the dies. You've got a Jackson, Michigan one with the Chicago Olympia Lodge, a chapter and a lodge. Now, I told you a while back about the company that made the mistake, Brookston Crookston. They made a lot of mistakes. I don't know which one it is. I will eventually figure it out. But this is the Brainerd chapter number 42 out of Brainerd, Minnesota. Now, they used a similar design on the back of a whole bunch of pennies. The only difference was the charter date. Well, this one has the Brainerd, Minnesota front, but it's got the reverse off the art chapter number 53 out of Minneapolis. It comes in brass and, no, this one is Brainerd, and it has the reverse of the Pearson chapter out of Crookston, Minnesota. I kept getting the reverses mixed up. Here's the Pearson chapter out of Brookston, Minnesota, with the back from the Grafton chapter number 9 of North Dakota. And that was done in several different metals. We don't have an image of it, but the art chapter out of Minneapolis comes with the reverse of the Pearson out of Crookston. Now, some of them, this one, Indian chapter number 1 out of McAllister, in this case, McAllister spelled right. This was done after Lovett had died. This is an entirely different design. In this design, they actually used speculation up to the 1970s. Some of them may have been made for collectors. But the reverse of it is the Omaha chapter number 1 out of Omaha, Nebraska. Now, the Omaha looks a little similar. The reverse looks a little similar, but this is a very unusual mule. We know of 2 of them. Then this one was real interesting. This was out of Virgil Brand's collection. Brand had the largest coin collection that had ever existed when he died in 1924. He had in his little 2x2 pouch, it was labeled Meldanza chapter out of Glen Cove, New York. It didn't mention on the back of on that 2x2 that the reverse of it was Woods chapter number 14 out of Henniker, New Hampshire. And as far as I know right now, this is the only one of this mule now. Really nice one. Here's Grafton, North Dakota, with the back of Columbian chapter number 42 out of Minneapolis. This company, you know, all that they looked a lot alike, and this company really goofed it. And here's the one from Grafton with the reverse of the Pearson chapter number 41. Again, this one's likely a salesman's sample of Buffalo, Minnesota, with the hardware convention on the back. So there's some good examples of the mules. We'll do one more and we'll be ready. I'm not going to go an hour. Hopefully there's some questions on it. I mean, we could go on for an hour, but I don't want to bore you to death. Error charter. Now, this particular one, they goofed up on the charter and they went in and on the August, they overstamped 5. I can't make out what it was before they did it. This particular chapter has it 1860. Well, it should have been 1869, Vandalia, Illinois. This one's a real modern mistake. Corinthian chapter out of Des Moines, Iowa, chartered 1957. Well, this one was chartered in should have been 1857. There's several that are off 100 years. This Jackson one was should have been 1913, and if you go to the die that has the 1913, you can see that they overstamped the 9 with the 3. This one's because of the mistake they made on the other penny. Crookston was chartered 10 years before that, but when they got the dies on the other mixed up. And here's Newport, Rhode Island, 1906, which should have been 1806. That's all I'm going to do. Paula, are you there? I can't.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much. We don't have any questions. And that's totally fine. But I want to just thank you, Tom, for presenting, and just let everybody know that we will, we have further seminars coming up. Always be sure to check the e-learning website on the money.org, and you can kind of catch up on what's there. Tom, did you want to say anything else before we?
If they got any questions, my email is tcarson@E like in Edward, W like in William, K like in King, M like in Mary.net.
Perfect. That's great. That's super helpful for people watching later, maybe, or that just go through and then have something pop up into their head. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Tom.
Well, thank you for having me. And I hope people realize how powerful Token Catalog is right now. We have over 600,000 tokens from around the world listed. There's 18,900 US Masonics listed.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, thank you for that. I hope you have a great evening.
Well, you too. And again, if you have questions, call me.
Sounds great.
Email me.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Tom.
Bye-bye.